Racism often hides in plain sight, but in a small American town, that quiet truth would erupt into undeniable action. What started as a brazen attempt to intimidate a black woman would spark a chain of events that dismantled one of the most dangerous hate networks in the country. None of the gang members who surrounded her could have known that the woman they underestimated was a decorated Army Ranger with years of combat experience and an unwavering sense of justice. Before they knew what hit them, their operations would be in shambles, key members of the network would be exposed, and a frightened community would begin to find its voice. This isn't just a story about a skilled soldier standing up to a group of racists. This is about how one woman's unyielding determination dismantled a powerful hate network, inspired a town to fight back, and proved that courage and justice can triumph over fear and oppression. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe. The smell of lilies filled the air as sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of St. Emmanuel's Church. Maya Daniels sat in the third pew, her back straight and hands resting on her lap. The soft hum of the choir blended with the murmured prayers of the congregation, creating a sanctuary of peace. It was a rare moment of calm for Maya, a chance to push aside the weight of her past and focus on the present. A faint creak echoed through the space as the church doors swung open. It was nothing unusual. Latecomers were common during Sunday service, but the sound of heavy boots striking the polished floor carried an unnatural weight, breaking the rhythm of the sacred space. Maya's eyes flicked toward the entrance, her instincts sharpening. 6 men walked in, their presence jarring against the serenity of the church. Dressed in white tank tops that clung to their frames, the men's tattoos stretched across their muscular arms and necks, bearing symbols of hate and supremacy. Their shaved heads glistened under the sunlight streaming through the stained glass, and their movements were slow, deliberate, and meant to draw attention. The congregation fell silent. A child's quiet giggle turned into a stifled cry as his mother pulled him close. Reverend Elijah Carter paused mid-sentence at the pulpit, his welcoming expression replaced with a subtle tension. The tallest of the men stepped forward, his boots striking the floor in deliberate, echoing thuds. His broad shoulders filled the aisle as he swept his gaze across the room, taking in the sea of nervous faces. He smirked. "Nice crowd," he said, his voice casual yet laced with malice. "Didn't think you'd be so packed in here today." The congregation shifted uneasily. A few heads turned toward the exits, and murmurs began to ripple through the room. Maya didn't move. Her sharp eyes were fixed on the men, her calm demeanor masking the storm brewing within her. Reverend Carter stepped forward, gripping the edge of the pulpit. His voice was steady but held a thread of warning. "Gentlemen, this is a house of God. You are welcome here if you come in peace, but I will not allow disruption." The tall man laughed softly, a low chuckle that reverberated through the church. "Relax, preacher. We're not here to cause trouble, just here to look around." He gestured to the others, who spread out slowly, their boots heavy against the wooden floor. One of the men leaned against the back of a pew, his tattooed arms crossed as he stared down at an elderly woman clutching her purse. Another deliberately brushed past a teenage boy, knocking the hymnal out of his hands with a smirk. The boy froze, his knuckles white as he clutched the pew for support. The tension thickened. Maya's jaw tightened, but she remained still, her focus razor-sharp. She scanned the men's movements, her military instincts cataloging their positions, their body language, and the exits. The tall man stepped closer to the pulpit, tilting his head at Reverend Carter. "You've got a nice place here, preacher," he said, his voice low and condescending. "Real shame it's full of the wrong kind of people." Gasps rippled through the congregation, but no one spoke. A young mother clutched her child tightly, whispering hurried prayers under her breath. The tension in the air was almost suffocating. Reverend Carter's gaze hardened. "There is no wrong kind of person in God's house," he said firmly. "This church is open to all." The man's smirk widened. "That's so?" He turned, his gaze landing on Maya. "What about you?" he asked, his voice louder now, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. "You seem real quiet. Got nothing to say?" Maya slowly raised her eyes to meet his. Her face remained calm, unreadable, but there was a quiet steel in her gaze. "Not yet," she said evenly. The man chuckled again, shaking his head as he stepped back into the aisle. "Preacher, I think you've got a smart one here." He motioned for his men to keep moving. "Don't worry, we're not staying long. Just wanted to drop by and let you know. 2 weeks. That's all you've got to clear out. After that, well," he trailed off, shrugging casually. The congregation collectively held its breath. Maya's gaze flicked to the side exits, where a few families had begun quietly slipping out. She remained seated, her hands steady in her lap, waiting, watching. For now, the men seemed content to posture and taunt, but Maya could feel it, the fragile line they were walking. It wouldn't hold for long. The men continued to move through the church, their boots striking the wooden floor in a deliberate rhythm. Each step was calculated to claim the space as their own, their movements slow and predatory. The congregation sat frozen in uneasy silence, their fear palpable. Reverend Carter stood firm at the pulpit, his hands gripping its edges as he addressed the church. "Stay calm, everyone," he urged, his voice steady but strained. "Remember, this is God's house. Let him guide us." The tall man leading the group sauntered down the center aisle, trailing his fingers along the backs of the pews as if he owned the place. He smirked, glancing at the stained glass windows, the altar, and finally at Reverend Carter. "Nice setup you've got here, preacher," he said, his tone casual but dripping with disdain. "Bet it cost a pretty penny. Tell me, how does a place like this stay afloat? Taxpayer dollars, maybe?" A few nervous murmurs rose from the congregation, but most stayed silent, gripping their seats or whispering quiet prayers. "Stays afloat through faith and hard work," Reverend Carter replied, his voice firm. "We are a community, bound together by love and resilience." The man's smirk widened. "Love and resilience, huh? You hear that, boys?" He gestured to his group, who chuckled and exchanged looks. "You feel the love in here?" One of the men leaned against a pew, picking up a hymnal and flipping through it carelessly before tossing it onto the floor. Another snorted, nudging his companion. "Seems like they're awful quiet for a community," one of them muttered loudly, his tone mocking. The tall man's gaze shifted, landing on Maya. Her unwavering presence in the pews stood out against the fearful congregation. He pointed at her. "You've been awfully quiet," he said, his voice sharp. "Not scared, are you?" Maya's gaze met his, steady and calm. "No," she replied evenly. Her simple answer clearly irritated him, though he hid it behind a chuckle. "You've got guts, I'll give you that. You from around here?" "I've been here long enough," Maya replied, her tone unflinching. Before the leader could respond, a man near the back of the church stood, his voice ringing out. "You don't run this town," the man said, his tone defiant. "This town's done with people like you." The congregation stirred, a few murmurs of agreement rippling through the crowd. The leader's smirk twisted into a scowl. He turned sharply toward the man, his boots echoing against the floor as he approached. "Oh, you've got a mouth on you," he said, his voice dripping with menace. "Think you're brave, standing up like that?" The man's face tightened, but he didn't back down. "I think you don't belong here," he shot back, his words clear and deliberate. The tall man let out a humorless laugh, leaning in just close enough to invade the man's space. "Big words for a nobody in a cheap suit," he sneered, his tone venomous. "Let me tell you something, buddy. People like you talk big until someone shuts you up. You want to find out how that feels?" One of his men barked out a laugh. "Bet he's shaking in his boots now," he jeered, his voice carrying through the tense silence. The room fell into a stifling quiet, all eyes on the two men. Maya's gaze flicked toward the exchange, her body tensing like a coiled spring. She knew what was coming next if the leader wasn't stopped. Reverend Carter stepped in, his voice cutting through the tension. "That's enough," he said firmly, his words directed at the leader. "This is God's house. Intimidation and violence have no place here." The leader turned to face the reverend, his scowl deepening. "You don't get to tell me what I can or can't do, preacher," he spat. "This isn't your town anymore." Maya's jaw tightened as she watched, her mind racing. The tension in the room was on the verge of snapping, and she knew it wouldn't take much to set it off. For now, she stayed still, watching, calculating. The air in the church was thick with tension, each second stretching into an eternity. The tall man's sneer deepened as he stood inches from the defiant man in the back pew. His voice dropped to a dangerous growl. "You think you've got guts, standing up to me?" he said, his lips curling into a mocking grin. "Let me show you what happens to people who don't know their place." Before anyone could react, the leader's hand shot out, grabbing the man by the collar. Gasps rippled through the congregation as the older man struggled, his hands gripping at the leader's arm. "Let him go!" someone shouted from the pews, their voice shaky but desperate. The leader ignored them, yanking the man closer until their faces were only inches apart. "You think you're tough?" he hissed. "You're nothing. You hear me? Nothing." The man glared back, his jaw clenched despite the fear flickering in his eyes. "You don't scare me," he managed through gritted teeth. "Oh, I'm not here to scare you," the leader said with a cold laugh. "I'm here to make sure you understand who's in charge." The congregation was frozen, their fear silencing any attempt to intervene. Even Reverend Carter looked unsure, his hands gripping the pulpit as he tried to gauge whether stepping in would make things worse. But then a voice rang out, cutting through the rise in chaos like a blade. "Enough!" The word echoed through the church, sharp and commanding. All eyes turned toward the source, Maya. She had risen from her seat, her posture tall and imposing, her gaze locked on the leader with unyielding intensity. Her voice was steady, but there was no mistaking the warning in her tone. The leader's grip faltered for a moment as he turned to face her, his expression shifting to one of surprise. It was clear he hadn't expected anyone else to speak up, let alone a black woman standing so resolute in the face of his intimidation. "You've made your point," Maya said, her voice calm but unrelenting. "Let him go and leave." The leader's surprise quickly turned to amusement. He let out a low, mocking laugh, releasing the man's collar with a shove that sent him stumbling back into his pew. "And who the hell do you think you are?" he asked, his tone dripping with derision. Maya didn't flinch. "Someone who doesn't tolerate bullies," she replied evenly. The leader took a step toward her, his smirk returning. "You've got a big mouth for someone who's way out of her league," he said, his voice laced with malice. "Try me," Maya said, her tone cutting and deliberate. The tension in the room was electric now, the congregation holding their breath as the two locked eyes. For the first time, the leader seemed to hesitate, unsure of what he was dealing with. One of his men muttered, "Boss, maybe we should just—" "Shut up," the leader snapped, cutting him off with a glare. He turned back to Maya, his smirk faltering for just a second. Maya took a slow step forward, her gaze never wavering. "You're done here," she said firmly. "Leave while you still can." The leader's fists clenched at his sides, but he didn't move. Behind him, his men exchanged uneasy glances, clearly unprepared for this level of defiance. Reverend Carter's voice broke the silence. "You've heard her. This is a house of God, and you have no business here." The leader sneered, glancing around the room one last time. "This isn't over," he growled, his words a thinly veiled threat. "You've got 2 weeks to pack up and leave, or we'll make sure you regret it." Without another word, he motioned to his men. Reluctantly, they followed, their heavy boots echoing as they made their way out. The doors slammed shut behind them, leaving the church in a stunned silence. Maya exhaled slowly, her fists unclenching as she turned to face the congregation. "Is everyone okay?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tension still crackling in the air. Reverend Carter nodded, though his expression remained grim. "For now," he said quietly, "but I fear they'll be back." Maya's jaw tightened. "Let them try," she said. The silence in the church was suffocating. The congregation sat frozen, their faces pale with fear and disbelief. The echoes of the gang's boots still lingered in the air. a cruel reminder of what had just unfolded. Reverend Carter stepped away from the pulpit, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. "Everyone," he said softly, his deep voice carrying a gentle authority, "it's over for now. Please, take a moment to breathe." A young mother near the back of the room clutched her son tightly, her lips moving in whispered prayers. "Over," she said, her voice trembling. "That man said they'll come back. What do we do then?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the pews. An elderly woman shook her head, her hands trembling as she clutched her rosary. "They're going to hurt us," she said, her voice cracking. "They want us gone. Maybe we should just leave," another voice said, a middle-aged man sitting near the front. "If we go now, maybe they'll leave us alone." "Leave?" Reverend Carter's voice rose, a rare spark of indignation breaking through his calm demeanor. "This is our home. We've built this church together. Brick by brick, we can't let fear drive us away." The man's shoulders slumped, but he didn't argue. Around him, others exchanged uncertain glances, their fear outweighing their resolve. Maya stood near the center aisle, her sharp gaze sweeping over the room. She saw the fear in their eyes, the way they avoided looking directly at her, as though they didn't know what to make of her defiance. "They're cowards," Maya said, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "Every single one of them. They only have power if you give it to them." Heads turned toward her, some hopeful, others skeptical. The young mother clutched her son tighter. "You saw what they did," she said, her voice shaking. "They grabbed Mr. Jenkins like he was nothing. They're not just cowards. They're dangerous." "They are dangerous," Maya agreed, her tone steady. "But that doesn't mean they're unstoppable. They rely on fear to control you. If you let them scare you into running, they've already won." An older man near the back frowned. "Easy for you to say," he muttered. "You're not the one they're coming after next." Maya turned to face him fully, her eyes narrowing slightly. "They're coming after all of us," she said firmly. "Today, it was the church. Tomorrow it could be your house, your business, your family. They won't stop until we stand up to them." The room fell silent again, her words hanging heavily in the air. Reverend Carter cleared his throat, stepping closer to Maya. "Maya is right," he said, though his voice carried a note of uncertainty. "We cannot let them bully us into leaving, but we also must be careful. These men are violent. We need to protect ourselves and each other." A younger man near the middle of the room raised his hand slightly, his expression hesitant. "What about the police?" he asked. "We should report this." "The police?" someone else scoffed. "You think they'll do anything?" "Half of them probably agree with those men." The room erupted into murmured arguments, fear and frustration bubbling to the surface. Maya raised her hand, silencing the room with a sharp motion. "We report it," she said. "Even if the police don't act, it creates a record. It shows we're not going to stay silent." Reverend Carter nodded. "She's right. I'll make the call myself." "Calling them won't stop those men from coming back," the elderly woman said, her voice breaking. "What if they bring more next time? What if they—" "They won't bring more," Maya interrupted, her voice cold and certain. "Bullies don't escalate unless they think they're still in control. The only way they come back stronger is if they believe you'll roll over." The congregation exchanged uneasy glances. The fear was still there, heavy and unshakable, but Maya's words stirred something, an ember of defiance that hadn't been there moments ago. Reverend Carter placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've already done more for us than we could have asked," he said quietly. "But this isn't your fight alone. It's everyone's fight," Maya replied, her gaze sweeping the room. "And I'll see it through to the end. But I need all of you to stop thinking about what might happen if you stand up and start thinking about what will happen if you don't." The room was silent again, but the fear wasn't as stifling. The congregation was still shaken, still unsure. But Maya had planted a seed. "Go home for now," Reverend Carter said after a long pause. "We'll come together again soon, and we'll decide how to move forward." One by one, the congregation began to leave, their movements slow and reluctant. Maya stayed behind, standing by the pulpit as she watched them go. Reverend Carter turned to her, his expression heavy with gratitude and concern. "I don't know how we'll face this," he admitted, "but I'm glad you were here today." Maya nodded, her jaw tight. "So am I," she said, but her mind was already racing, calculating the next steps. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across the nearly empty parking lot of St. Emmanuel's Church. Maya Daniels walked briskly toward her car, her senses sharp despite the stillness. The faint rustle of leaves and chirp of crickets filled the air. But her instincts told her she wasn't alone. The crunch of boots on asphalt broke the quiet, sending a ripple of tension down her spine. Slowly, she turned, her sharp eyes locking onto 6 familiar figures stepping out from the shadows. It was them. The leader of the gang stood at the front, his broad shoulders illuminated by the flickering glow of a nearby streetlight. His white tank top clung to his frame, his arms inked with menacing symbols. Behind him, his men fanned out, forming a loose semicircle as they approached. "Well, well," the leader said, his voice dripping with mockery. "If it isn't little Miss Mouthy, thought you could just walk out of here like nothing happened?" Maya turned fully, keeping her back to her car. Her expression remained calm, her voice measured. "You don't seem to know when to quit," she replied. The leader's smirk widened, his teeth yellowed under the dim light. "Quit? We're just getting started." His boots scraped against the asphalt as he took a deliberate step closer. "You made a fool out of me in there, and I don't let that slide." One of the younger men laughed, his voice sharp and grating. "She's just a girl," he said, leaning against a nearby lamppost. "Probably thinks she's tough, 'cause she can yell loud." Another chimed in, his tone dripping with disdain. "Yeah, what are you gonna do, huh? Call the cops? Pretty sure they won't be rushing out here for someone like you." The group burst into laughter, the sound echoing through the lot. Maya's gaze didn't waver. When the laughter died down, she stepped forward slightly, her posture deliberate and commanding. "A girl, huh?" she said, her voice calm but sharp. "That should scare you even more." The leader's smirk faltered, confusion flashing across his face. "What the hell's that supposed to mean?" Maya took another step forward, closing the gap between them. "It means that as a girl, I did what most of you could only dream of. I made it through Ranger School. I trained with the best. I fought alongside the best. And I won't let a pack of cowards with too much mouth and not enough brains intimidate me." The youngest member of the gang shifted uneasily, his bravado cracking. "She's bluffing," he muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" Maya asked, her tone cutting through the night like steel. Her gaze swept over them, unflinching. "You want to find out?" The leader's face twisted into a sneer. "You think your fancy training matters out here?" he snarled. "This isn't a battlefield, lady. You're outnumbered 6-1. Let's see how tough you really are without your guns and your army buddies." One of the men barked out a laugh, stepping closer. "Yeah, let's see if all that ranger talk is just hot air." Maya didn't move, her calm exterior betraying none of the tension coiling within her. "You think the odds matter to me?" she said, her voice low and deliberate. "The only thing that's gonna matter in the next 5 minutes is how fast you can run once you realize you've made a mistake." The group's laughter faltered, replaced by uneasy glances and muttered curses. But the leader wasn't backing down. He stepped closer, his fists clenched, his teeth bared in a snarl. "You've got a big mouth," he growled, "and I'm gonna shut it for good." The tension in the air was electric, the fragile thread of control ready to snap. Maya's stance shifted slightly, her body poised like a spring. Her sharp gaze darted between them, calculating angles, distances, and movements. "Come on, then," she said, her voice quiet but razor-sharp. "Let's see what you've got." The leader's lips curled into a snarl as he lunged forward, and the others followed, their heavy boots pounding against the asphalt. Maya sidestepped effortlessly, her movements fluid and precise. She twisted, delivering a sharp elbow strike to his ribs that sent him staggering back with a grunt. "You're faster than you look," the leader spat, clutching his side, his expression twisted with anger and surprise. Two more gang members surged forward, emboldened by their leader's attack. Maya's body shifted, her instincts taking over. The first came at her from the left, swinging a haymaker aimed at her head. Maya ducked low, her foot snapping out in a sweeping kick that knocked his legs out from under him. He hit the asphalt hard, a groan escaping his lips as he clutched his back. The second man hesitated for half a second before charging. Maya moved like lightning, stepping into his swing and catching his wrist. With a swift twist, she disarmed him, his fist opening reflexively. A sharp knee to his stomach doubled him over, and Maya followed it with an upward strike to his jaw, sending him sprawling. The remaining four men froze, their earlier bravado replaced with uncertainty. The youngest member stepped back, his eyes darting between Maya and the two groaning men on the ground. "What the hell?" he muttered, panic creeping into his voice. The leader snarled, waving the others forward. "Don't just stand there. Get her!" Maya exhaled sharply, her stance shifting as the remaining men circled her. Her muscles burned, adrenaline coursing through her veins, but her focus was razor-sharp. One of the men lunged from behind, his arms outstretched to grab her. Maya spun on her heel, her elbow connecting with the side of his face in a sickening crack. He stumbled, blood streaming from his nose, and she followed with a kick to his chest that sent him crashing into the lamppost. The other three hesitated, their confidence crumbling. "Boss," one of them stammered, glancing at the leader. She's not normal." The leader's face twisted in frustration. "She's one woman. Stop acting like cowards." Maya wiped a trickle of blood from her lip, her sharp gaze locking onto the leader. "You should listen to them," she said, her voice steady despite the rising tension. The leader's eyes narrowed, his fists clenching. "You're gonna pay for that," he growled, advancing toward her. The two remaining men flanked him, clearly reluctant, but unwilling to back down. Maya's body remained poised, her breathing controlled as she prepared for the next wave. The leader feinted to the left before swinging hard to the right. Maya caught his wrist mid-swing, twisting his arm and slamming her knee into his stomach. He gasped, doubling over, but managed to shove her backward. Before she could regain her footing, one of the other men took advantage of the opening. His fist connected with her shoulder, sending a sharp jolt of pain radiating down her arm. Maya gritted her teeth, stepping into the attack and driving her forearm into his throat. He staggered back, choking and clutching his neck. The youngest member of the gang stood frozen, his wide eyes darting between the chaos and the exit. He took a shaky step back, muttering under his breath, "This isn't worth it. Don't even think about it." The leader barked, straightening with a wince. "We're not done yet." Maya's chest rose and fell steadily as she assessed the situation. The fight was far from over, but the gang's resolve was cracking. Maya's breaths came steady, her body tense and ready as the remaining gang members circled her. The leader wiped blood from the corner of his mouth, his expression dark with fury. "You're tough, I'll give you that," he spat, his voice low and venomous. "But you're not walking out of here without learning your place." One of the men lunged from the side, his movements more frantic than strategic. Maya twisted to block, catching his arm and delivering a sharp punch to his ribs. He let out a strangled cry, stumbling back. But another gang member was already charging her blind spot. The blow came hard, a fist slamming into her side. Pain exploded through her ribs as she staggered, barely managing to deflect the follow-up strike. The leader took the opportunity to close the distance, his fist connecting with her shoulder. Maya grunted, her footing slipping as the asphalt scraped against her knees. "Not so tough now, are you?" The leader snarled, looming over her. Maya's eyes burned with defiance. She planted her hands on the ground and pushed herself up, ignoring the sharp ache in her ribs. "I've been through worse," she said, her voice steady despite the pain. Her words seemed to enrage him further. He swung again, but this time she was ready. Maya ducked, her fist driving into his stomach with brutal force. The leader stumbled back, his expression twisting in pain and disbelief. Before she could press her advantage, another gang member barreled into her, knocking her against the side of her car. The impact left her winded, her vision momentarily blurring. "She's not invincible," one of them shouted, emboldened by the hit. Maya gritted her teeth, shaking off the daze as the man came at her again. She moved on instinct, ducking low and driving her elbow into his side. He crumpled with a pained groan, rolling onto the ground. The youngest member of the gang, standing near the edge of the lot, took a step back, his face pale. "I'm out," he muttered, turning and sprinting toward the street. "Coward!" the leader bellowed after him. But his fury was short-lived as Maya surged forward. She caught one of the remaining men off guard, her fist cracking against his jaw. He staggered, his head snapping back before he crumpled to the ground. The leader glanced around, his confidence visibly shaken as two more of his men hesitated. "Get back here!" he yelled at the boy, disappearing into the distance, but his voice wavered. The other two exchanged a glance before one of them cursed under his breath. "This ain't worth it," he muttered, grabbing the other by the arm. "Let's go." They bolted, their footsteps fading into the night. The leader's jaw clenched as he watched them flee. "Cowards!" he spat, turning his glare back to Maya. She was battered, her movements slower, but the fire in her eyes hadn't dimmed. "You're on your own now," Maya said, her voice cold and sharp. The leader's expression twisted with rage, and he lunged at her with a wild swing. Maya sidestepped, but the pain in her ribs slowed her enough for his fist to graze her shoulder. She gritted her teeth, retaliating with a brutal knee to his stomach. He doubled over, gasping for air, but he wasn't finished. With a desperate growl, he grabbed her arm, trying to wrestle her to the ground. Maya countered, shifting her weight and driving him back into the side of her car. The leader groaned, his strength faltering as he slumped against the vehicle. Maya stepped back, her chest heaving as she surveyed the aftermath. The parking lot was littered with groaning bodies and discarded bravado. The leader, clutching his ribs, glared up at her with pure hatred. "You think this is over?" he spat, his voice weak but full of venom. "This isn't over." Maya wiped blood from her lip, her eyes narrowing. "It is for tonight," she said, her tone low and final. As the leader dragged himself to his feet and stumbled away into the night, Maya leaned against her car, her body aching from the fight. She let out a slow breath, the adrenaline fading and the pain settling in. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The parking lot was eerily quiet now, the only sounds coming from the groans of the three men sprawled on the ground. Maya stood over them, her breathing steady, despite the pain radiating through her ribs and shoulder. The adrenaline still coursing through her veins sharpened her focus. She crouched down next to the closest man, the one clutching his jaw where her fist had connected. Grabbing him by the collar of his tank top, she yanked him upright, ignoring his wince of pain. Her eyes burned with a fury that froze him in place. "You're going to tell me everything," she growled, her voice low but laced with steel. "Who sent you? What's your plan?" The man tried to avert his gaze, mumbling something under his breath. Maya tightened her grip, her voice rising to a shout. "Look at me!" His head snapped up, fear flashing in his eyes. "I don't know anything," he stammered. "It was just Travis's idea." "Don't lie to me," Maya snapped, shaking him hard enough to make his teeth clatter. "You think I don't know how to tell when someone's hiding something? You picked the wrong person to mess with." The other two men watched in stunned silence, their earlier bravado shattered. One of them, the younger of the pair, began to crawl backward, trying to distance himself from Maya's wrath. "Don't even think about running," she said sharply, her voice cutting through the stillness. "Unless you want to be the next one I drag back here." The younger man froze, his eyes wide as he nodded quickly. "I'm not going anywhere." Maya turned her attention back to the man in her grasp. "Talk!" she barked. "What's the plan? Why were you at the church?" He hesitated for a moment too long. Maya slammed him back against the ground, leaning over him. "You really want to make me ask again?" They just wanted to scare you," he blurted out, his voice shaking. "Travis said if we scared the preacher and his people enough, they'd leave town. That's all I know, I swear." Maya's eyes narrowed. "And how were you planning to scare us? Spray painting insults? Breaking windows? What's next on your list?" The man swallowed hard, his gaze darting to the others. Travis said we'd take it further if they didn't leave. Fires, maybe. Or worse. Worse, Maya hissed, leaning in closer. What does that mean? The man shook his head frantically, his face pale. I don't know. I just know he said we'd make it clear this town isn't for them. Maya let go of him abruptly, letting him slump back to the ground. She turned her attention to the younger man, stalking toward him. He scrambled to sit upright, holding his hands out defensively. Names, she demanded. Who's in your group? How many of you are there? I don't know all of them, he stammered. But there's like 20, maybe more. Travis knows them all. He's got connections to other groups too, other towns. They all work together sometimes. Maya's jaw tightened, her mind racing. Other towns? She repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. Yeah, the man said, nodding quickly. Travis talks about it all the time. Says we're part of something bigger. Some network or something. They share money, resources, plans. He said we could clear out anyone we didn't want and make places like this ours again. Maya's fists clenched at her sides. Her mind flashed back to the terrified faces of the congregation, the cries of children as the gang stormed into the church. This wasn't just a local problem. It was systemic, calculated, and far-reaching. She crouched down in front of him, her face inches from his. "Where's Travis going?" she asked, her voice low and dangerous. "I don't know," he said quickly, his hands trembling. "He doesn't tell us where he goes, but he talks about safe houses, places he can lay low if things go bad." "Where?" "Out of town. I think there's one in Hillsboro, another one in the woods outside Springfield. That's all I know, I swear." Maya studied him for a long moment, her piercing gaze holding him in place. Finally she stood, her chest heaving as she processed what she'd learned. "You've got two options," she said coldly, her voice carrying over the quiet parking lot. "You can take this information to the cops and turn yourselves in, or I'll find you again. And I promise, it won't be this easy next time." The men nodded frantically, their fear evident. "Now get out of my sight," Maya snapped, stepping back. The three scrambled to their feet, limping and staggering as they fled into the night. Maya stood alone in the parking lot, her fists clenched as she stared after them. This was bigger than she'd thought, but she wasn't backing down. If Travis and his network thought they could terrorize communities unchecked, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The drive home was agonizing. Every bump in the road sent sharp jolts of pain through Maya's ribs, and her shoulder throbbed with every turn of the wheel. Blood from a small cut on her forehead had dried, leaving a sticky trail down the side of her face. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white as she forced herself to focus on the road. When she finally pulled into the driveway of her small, modest house, the relief was fleeting. The adrenaline that had kept her upright was wearing off, replaced by the dull, relentless ache of her injuries. Maya sat in the car for a moment, staring at the darkened windows of her home. The quiet was almost suffocating. With a deep breath, she pushed the door open and climbed out, each movement sending fresh waves of pain through her battered body. She limped toward the door, her legs heavy, her breaths shallow. Once inside, she locked the door behind her and leaned against it, closing her eyes for a moment. Her mind raced with the information she'd extracted from the gang members. Travis and his network weren't just a local problem. They were part of something much larger, something organized and dangerous. The thought was both infuriating and sobering. Maya straightened, wincing as she moved toward the kitchen. She grabbed her phone from the counter, scrolling through her contacts until she found Reverend Carter's name. Her finger hesitated for a moment before pressing the call button. The phone rang twice before the Reverend's calm, familiar voice answered. "Maya? Is everything all right?" She let out a dry laugh, her voice tinged with exhaustion. Define all right. There was a pause, the weight of his concern palpable even through the phone. "What happened? They found me in the parking lot," she said bluntly, leaning against the counter as she spoke. "Tried to scare me into silence." "Good Lord," Reverend Carter murmured, his voice heavy with worry. "Are you hurt?" "I'll live," Maya said, brushing off the question, but they didn't walk away unscathed. I got some answers out of them. The Reverend's voice hardened slightly. What did you learn? Travis isn't just some punk trying to stir up trouble, Maya said, her tone sharp. He's part of a network, multiple towns, safe houses, resources. They're organized, and they're not going to stop until they push us out of here, or worse. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When the Reverend finally spoke, his voice was low and steady. This is worse than I thought. Yeah, Maya said, her jaw tightening. And it's not just us. If we don't stop them, they'll keep doing this in other towns, other churches, other communities. What do you plan to do? He asked quietly. Maya exhaled, running a hand through her hair. I don't know yet, but I'm not letting this slide. Travis and his group need to be shut down. For good. That's a dangerous path, the Reverend warned. You've already risked so much. I don't care, Maya said, her voice firm. Someone has to stand up to them. And if it's not me, then who? There was another pause, followed by a soft sigh. You're a strong woman, Maya, but you don't have to carry this burden alone. Let me help. Maya shook her head, even though he couldn't see her. I appreciate that. But this isn't something the congregation needs to take on. This is personal now. I'll handle it. The Reverend's tone softened, but there was still a note of determination in his voice. Just promise me you'll be careful. The people here need you more than you know. I'll do what I can, Maya said, her voice quieter now. Thanks, Reverend. I'll keep you updated. Take care of yourself, Maya, he said gently, before the line went dead. Maya set the phone down on the counter, her gaze distant as she stared at the wall. The pain in her body was nothing compared to the fire burning in her chest. Travis and his group thought they could terrorize her community and walk away unscathed. They were wrong. The quiet of the house felt oppressive as Maya sat at her kitchen table, a notebook spread open in front of her. The faint glow of the overhead light cast long shadows across the page, where she had begun scrawling names, locations, and connections in sharp, deliberate strokes. Her ribs ached, her shoulder throbbed, and exhaustion tugged at the edges of her mind. But she refused to stop. This wasn't just about her anymore. It wasn't even just about her town. This was about the countless communities Travis and his network had terrorized, and the ones they would target next if she didn't act. Her phone buzzed softly, breaking the silence. Maya glanced at the screen. A message from an old contact lit up. The name, a familiar one from her army days. Let me know what you need. Always got your back. Maya exhaled slowly, her grip tightening on the pen. The idea had been brewing since she left the parking lot, and now it was solidifying into a plan. She couldn't do this alone. Travis's network was too vast, too organized, and too dangerous. She needed help. People she could trust implicitly. People who knew how to operate outside the system. With deliberate precision, she began jotting down names. Sakurnat, Alex Carter, a demolition expert with a knack for tracking and a sharp mind for strategy. Latern Sofia Marquez, intelligence and reconnaissance, the best at gathering information without being seen. Chief Warrant Officer Darnell Boomer Jones, tactical logistics and equipment, a master of moving supplies unnoticed. Specialist Rachel Yang, cyber operations, capable of uncovering the deepest secrets of any organization. Maya stared at the list, her heart steady despite the enormity of what she was planning. These were people she'd trusted with her life in the past, and she knew they would step up now. But this wouldn't just be about assembling a team. It had to be more than that. She flipped to a fresh page and began outlining the operation. Intelligence gathering. Identify key locations, safe houses, and leaders within Travis's network. Track their movements, resources, and communication methods. Targeted disruption. Strike at their infrastructure, cut off funding, destroy supply lines, and dismantle their hierarchy. Systematic removal. Take down the leaders one by one, ensuring no one steps in to replace them. Secrecy and precision. Operate entirely off the grid. No police, no public attention. This had to be clean and efficient, leaving the network in shambles without a trail back to them. Maya leaned back, staring at the detailed plan in front of her. Her jaw tightened as she considered the risks. They would be operating without the safety net of the law, and any misstep could cost them everything. But after what she'd seen, she knew she couldn't rely on the police. They were either complicit or indifferent, and neither was acceptable. She picked up her phone again, scrolling through her contacts until she found the first name on her list, Alex. Her fingers hovered over the call button for a moment before she pressed it. The line rang twice before his familiar gruff voice answered. "Maya, it's been a while." "It has," she said, her voice steady. "I wouldn't be calling if it wasn't important." There was a pause on the other end, followed by a soft chuckle. "You've got my attention. What's going on?" Maya didn't waste time. She outlined the situation in blunt terms. Travis, his gang, the network, and their coordinated efforts to terrorize communities. By the time she finished, Alex's tone had shifted to something colder, more serious. "Sounds like you've got a hell of a fight on your hands," he said. "We do," Maya corrected. "I'm putting together a team. Off the books. No police, no bureaucracy. Just us." Another pause. Then, "You know I'm in. Who else are you bringing?" Maya rattled off the names. Each one met with a grunt of approval. "Sounds like old times," Alex said finally, his voice lighter. "Except this time, we're not waiting for orders." "Exactly," Maya said. They finalized the details of their first meeting. Neutral ground, secure communication channels, and a plan to coordinate without drawing attention. As Maya hung up, a faint sense of relief settled over her. She wasn't alone in this. With the right people, the right strategy, and the right execution, they could do more than just stop Travis. They could destroy his entire operation, root and stem. Her resolve hardened as she glanced at the notebook again. This wasn't just a fight. It was a mission, and failure wasn't an option. The meeting place was deliberately unremarkable. A small, out-of-the-way cabin tucked into the woods, far from prying eyes. The gravel driveway crunched beneath Maya's boots as she approached the front door, her ribs still aching with each step. A faint light spilled through the drawn curtains, and she could hear the low murmur of voices inside. Maya pushed the door open and stepped in. The room fell silent as four familiar faces turned toward her. Sergeant Alex Carter stood by the window, his tall, broad frame backlit by the glow of the lamp. His sharp eyes immediately scanned her, lingering on the bruises and cuts that marred her face. "You look like hell," he said, his tone neutral but laced with concern. "Nice to see you too, Alex," Maya replied dryly, shutting the door behind her. Sitting at the table was Sofia Marquez, her short, jet-black hair as sharp as her gaze. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "Figured if anyone was calling us together like this, it'd be you," she said, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. "What's the mission?" Darnell Boomer Jones was perched on the edge of the couch, his arms resting on his knees. He gave Maya a nod, his expression serious. "You wouldn't pull us out of retirement for something small," he said. "So let's hear it." Rachel Yang sat at the table with a laptop open in front of her, her fingers idly tapping on the keyboard. She glanced up, raising an eyebrow. "And here, I thought you'd disappeared into suburbia," she said, her tone light. "Guess I was wrong." Maya dropped a folder onto the table, the sound sharp in the quiet room. "This isn't a small-town problem," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "This is nationwide." She walked to the table, flipping the folder open to reveal maps, photos, and handwritten notes. "Travis Wainwright and his gang are just one piece of a much larger operation," she began, her tone steady but urgent. "They're part of a network. Hate groups spread across the country, working together to terrorize communities like ours. They're organized, they're funded, and they're dangerous." Sophia leaned forward, her smirk fading. "How dangerous are we talking?" "They've driven people out of towns with threats, violence, and arson," Maya replied. "They're targeting black communities, immigrant families, anyone they see as other. And they're not stopping." Boomer exhaled sharply, his jaw tightening. "How big is this network?" "I'm still piecing that together," Maya admitted. "But it's bigger than we thought. They've got safe houses, supply lines, and connections to similar groups in other states. Taking them down isn't going to be easy, which is why we're here, Alex said, his tone grim. We've done this before. We know how to dismantle an operation like this, but without the support of the law, Rachel added, her eyes narrowing. That's going to complicate things. Maya met her gaze. We can't rely on the police, she said firmly. They're either turning a blind eye or outright complicit. This has to stay off the books. No paper trail, no leaks. We act quickly, quietly, and decisively. Sophia tapped her fingers on the table, her expression thoughtful. What's the plan? Maya pointed to the map spread out before them. We start by gathering intel. Travis is in hiding, but his men gave me enough to work with. Safe houses in Hillsborough and Springfield. Rachel, I'll need you to dig deeper into their communication channels and funding. Find out who's backing them. Rachel nodded, her fingers already flying across the keyboard. Sophia, I need eyes on those locations. Figure out who's there, how many, and what they're guarding. Boomer, we'll need equipment. Vehicles, surveillance gear, anything you can scrounge up without drawing attention. And me? Alex asked, crossing his arms. You're with me, Maya said, her tone leaving no room for argument. We'll lead the strikes. Once we know where to hit, we dismantle them piece by piece, cut off their funding, destroy their safe houses, and take out their leaders. The room was silent for a moment as the weight of her words settled over the group. Then Boomer stood, his expression resolute. You know I'm in, he said. Whatever it takes. Sophia smirked faintly. It's not like I can say no to a challenge like this. Count me in. Rachel glanced up from her laptop, her eyes sharp. I'll find what you need. Just don't get killed before I can send it to you. Alex clapped Maya on the shoulder, gently, given her injuries. We've got your back. Let's take these bastards down. Maya nodded, a flicker of gratitude passing across her face. We've all seen what happens when people like this go unchecked, she said. Not this time. Not anymore. The group leaned in, their focus shifting to the maps and plans before them. The fight ahead would be brutal, but they were ready. The safe house in Hillsborough was buried deep in the woods, its isolation offering a false sense of security. Maya crouched low behind a thicket, her sharp eyes fixed on the ramshackle cabin ahead. Lanterns cast flickering light from the windows, shadows of movement inside betraying the activity within. Her earpiece crackled softly as Alex's voice came through. Visual confirmation. 3 on the porch. 2 circling the perimeter. I count at least 5 inside. Copy that, Maya replied, her voice calm despite the tension coiled in her chest. Sophia, status? A soft whisper came through. East side is clear. No cameras, no alarms. They're overconfident. Boomer? Packages in place, Boomer said, his voice low and steady. Ready to go loud. Maya took a slow breath, her mind running through the plan one last time. Rachel, you're up. Cut their communications. Already done, Rachel replied. They're completely dark. No calls for help coming from this place. Good. Alex, Sophia, get into position. Boomer, set off the distraction on my mark. The team moved silently, their years of training evident in their precision. Maya shifted, wincing at the sharp ache in her ribs. Despite the lingering pain, her focus was unbroken. Ready? Alex's voice came through. Maya raised her hand, her signal clear. Boomer, go! A split second later, a deafening explosion shattered the quiet, sending a plume of smoke and fire into the air behind the cabin. The ground trembled, and shouts erupted from the house as men spilled out, their weapons drawn. Maya darted toward the cabin as Alex moved in from the side, firing precise, controlled shots. Suppressor-muted impacts hit legs and shoulders, sending men crashing to the ground with cries of pain, but leaving them alive. The porch cleared. Maya kicked the door in, her presence commanding as she swept the room with her weapon. The occupants froze for a moment, their shock quickly turning to panic as Sophia entered behind her, her pistol raised. Hands where I can see them! Maya barked, her voice cutting through the chaos. 2 men dropped their weapons immediately, their hands shooting into the air. Another hesitated, his hand inching toward a sidearm. Don't! Maya snapped, her rifle trained on him. The man froze, his eyes darting to his companions before raising his hands. "Secure them," Maya ordered. Sophia moved swiftly, zip-tying their wrists and forcing them to the floor as Alex and Boomer entered, covering the exits. "Rachel, what's the status on the delivery?" Maya asked into her calm. "Not here yet," Rachel replied. "You've got maybe 20 minutes before the next wave arrives." Maya scanned the room, her sharp eyes landing on a man sitting at a table, his face pale. He was clearly in charge. His panicked gaze darted between Maya and the scattered documents on the table. She strode toward him, grabbing him by the collar and pulling him to his feet. "Where's Travis?" she demanded. I don't know," the man stammered, his voice shaking. Maya slammed him back into the chair, her voice rising. "Don't lie to me. He left here for a reason. Where is he heading?" The man swallowed hard, sweat beading on his forehead. "Springfield," he choked out. "He's meeting some people there. Higher-ups. That's all I know." "Who's funding you?" Maya pressed, leaning closer. "I don't know names," he said quickly. "They're rich guys, out of state. They send money through shell companies. Travis handles all of that." Maya's jaw tightened as she processed the information. She turned to Alex. "Search the place. Get anything that looks useful. Documents, hard drives, whatever you can find." Sophia's voice crackled through the comms. "Perimeter's clear. No sign of reinforcements yet." "Good," Maya said, turning back to the man. "You've got one chance to walk out of here in one piece. Cooperate with the authorities when they come. If you lie, I'll find you again. Understood?" The man nodded frantically, his terror evident. Maya straightened, stepping back as Boomer moved in to secure the remaining men. The team worked quickly, stripping the safe house of anything valuable before preparing to leave. As Maya exited the cabin, the faint sounds of sirens reached her ears. The authorities Rachel had anonymously tipped off were finally on their way. She didn't look back as the team disappeared into the woods, leaving the chaos behind. Springfield was next, and they wouldn't stop until the entire network was dismantled. Springfield was a different beast altogether. The city was larger, busier, and the network's influence more entrenched. Maya and her team had spent 2 days gathering intel, piecing together the movements of Travis and his inner circle. It all led to an abandoned factory on the outskirts of town, a hub where plans were coordinated, funds were funneled, and connections to other groups were maintained. Maya crouched behind a rusted dumpster, her earpiece crackling softly. The faint hum of machinery inside the factory was the only sound in the still night air. "Confirmed visual," Rachel's voice came through. 4 vehicles parked outside. High activity. At least a dozen targets inside, maybe more. Alex's voice followed, calm and steady. "East side is lightly guarded. 2 men on patrol, 1 at the door. They don't look sharp." Boomer chimed in next. "West side is more active. Trucks moving in and out. Looks like a supply drop. They've got gear, crates of something heavy." Maya nodded to herself, her mind racing. "Sophia?" "On the roof," Sophia replied. "Skylights are open. I've got a clear view inside. Travis is here. 2nd floor, center office. He's got 2 guards with him. Looks like he's reviewing plans." Maya's jaw tightened. This was their moment. Taking Travis down here would cripple the network's operations in the region and send a clear message to the rest of the organization. "Rachel," Maya said, her voice low but firm, "scramble their comms. I want them blind." "Already on it," Rachel replied. "Give me 30 seconds. Boomer, we'll need a distraction on the west side. Make it loud but contained. Sophia, cover us from above. Alex, you're with me. We go for Travis. Move fast. No loose ends." The team confirmed their positions, and Maya exhaled slowly. The plan was set. "Rachel," Maya said. "Done," Rachel replied. "They're offline." Maya raised her hand, signaling Boomer. A few heartbeats later, an explosion rocked the west side of the factory, sending plumes of smoke into the night sky. Shouts erupted from inside as men scrambled to respond, their movements chaotic. "Move!" Maya ordered, darting toward the east entrance with Alex on her heels. The guard at the door turned, startled. But Maya was already on him, A swift strike to his wrist sent his weapon clattering to the ground, and a quick elbow to his temple left him slumped against the wall. Inside, the factory was a maze of machinery and dim lighting. Men shouted orders, their footsteps pounding on the metal walkways as they rushed toward the west side. Maya and Alex moved quickly and quietly, taking out 2 more guards with precise, non-lethal strikes before ascending the stairs to the 2nd floor. "Sophia," Maya said into her comm, her voice barely a whisper. "Status?" "Clear," Sophia replied. "Travis is still in the office. He's armed but distracted. Now's your chance." Maya and Alex reached the door, their backs pressed against the wall. Maya held up 3 fingers, counting down silently. 3, 2, 1. She kicked the door open, her weapon trained on Travis and his 2 guards. "Hands where I can see them," she barked, her voice echoing in the small office. The guards hesitated, their hands hovering near their weapons. Alex stepped in behind her, his aim unwavering. "Don't," he warned, his tone deadly calm. Travis raised his hands slowly, a cold sneer spreading across his face. "Well, if it isn't the hero herself," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "Took you long enough to find me." Maya's eyes burned with fury. "Shut up and sit down," she snapped. Travis lowered himself into the chair, his guards following suit. "You think taking me out changes anything?" he taunted. "There's more where I came from. You can't stop us all." Maya leaned in close, her voice low and cold. "We'll see about that." She motioned for Alex to secure the guards, then grabbed a folder from the desk, flipping through its contents. Maps, account ledgers, and coded messages filled the pages. "This is everything," she said, her voice steady. "Rachel, we've got the intel. Prepare for extraction." "Copy that," Rachel replied. Travis's sneer faded as he realized the extent of his loss. "You don't know what you're dealing with," he growled. Maya straightened, her gaze unflinching. "Neither do you." As Alex finished restraining the guards, Maya stepped back, her jaw tight. The network wasn't dead yet, but tonight they had dealt a devastating blow. The factory office was dimly lit, a single flickering bulb casting long shadows across the cluttered room. Maya's weapon remained trained on Travis, as Alex swiftly disarmed and zip-tied the 2 guards. The men sat slumped in their chairs, their expressions a mix of fury and fear. But Travis wore his trademark sneer, his confidence unshaken despite the chaos outside. "You think you've accomplished something tonight?" Travis drawled, leaning back in his chair as though he hadn't been forced into it. "You're playing a game you can't win." Maya took a step closer, her expression cold. "I'm not playing. Where's the rest of your network operating from?" Travis let out a dry laugh. "Do you really think I'm going to tell you? You might have gotten this far, but you've only scratched the surface. For every hub you take down, there's another waiting to rise." "Not if we take you all out at once," Alex said, his voice steady as he finished restraining the guards. He stepped beside Maya, his gaze locked on Travis. "You're not as untouchable as you think." Travis's sneer deepened. "Untouchable? No. Unstoppable? Yes. You think you're heroes, but you're just gnats buzzing around something bigger than you'll ever understand." Maya slammed her hand down on the desk, leaning in until her face was inches from his. "You can talk big all you want, but we both know the truth. You're losing. We've taken out your supply lines, your hubs, and your communication channels. It's only a matter of time before we dismantle the rest." Travis's smirk faltered for the briefest moment, before he leaned back, his expression hardening. "You're wasting your breath. I'm not giving you anything." Maya straightened, her jaw tight. "We'll see about that." She motioned to Alex. "Search the desk. He's arrogant enough to keep something useful close." As Alex rifled through the papers and folders strewn across the desk, Travis's composure cracked. "You're making a mistake," he growled. "You think the people backing me won't notice? Won't retaliate? You're painting targets on your backs." Maya ignored him, her eyes scanning the documents Alex handed her. A map with red circles, a ledger with coded entries, and a list of names. These were the breadcrumbs they needed. She placed the map on the desk, pointing to one of the circled locations. "What's here?" Travis's jaw tightened, his silence defiant. Maya leaned over him, her voice icy. "You can either cooperate, or we leave you tied up for the cops with just enough evidence to make sure you're their top priority. Trust me, your friends won't be coming to bail you out." Travis's eyes darted to the map, then back to her. "You really think the police will do anything? They've ignored us for years." "They won't ignore this," Alex said, holding up a hard drive he'd pulled from the desk. "Whatever's on here is going to bury you and your entire operation." Travis's face darkened. "You think you've won, but you don't even know who you're dealing with. You're in over your heads." Maya's lips curled into a cold smile. "We'll take our chances. But you're done." She turned to Alex. "Tie him up. Make it clear he's a gift for the authorities." Alex stepped forward, pulling Travis from his chair and securing his wrists behind his back. "This won't end the way you think," Travis spat, struggling against the restraints. "No, it'll end worse for you," Alex said, his tone calm. Maya reached for her calm. "Rachel, alert the local police. Leave the tip anonymous. Let them think this was their lucky night." "On it," Rachel replied. As Alex finished tying Travis to the chair, Maya leaned in one last time, her gaze cold and unyielding. "You've terrorized enough people. Tonight, it stops." Travis glared at her, his defiance flickering but not extinguished. "This won't stop anything. You'll see." Maya didn't respond. She turned and motioned for Alex to follow her. The team regrouped outside the factory, the faint sound of approaching sirens cutting through the night. As they disappeared into the shadows, Maya's voice came through the comms. "Boomer, light the secondary charges. Let's make sure they have enough to keep them busy." A distant rumble of controlled explosions followed moments later, ensuring the evidence left behind would tell a damning story. As the team faded into the night, Maya's resolve hardened. Travis might think his network was untouchable, but she knew better. The fight wasn't over. Not yet. The safe house was dimly lit, a quiet reprieve after the chaos of the factory raid. Maya sat at the head of a scratched wooden table, the air thick with the smell of stale coffee and adrenaline. Around her, the team worked in focused silence. Alex meticulously cataloged the files they had recovered. Sophia cleaned and reassembled her gear. Boomer tinkered with a small drone, and Rachel typed furiously on her laptop. "All right," Maya said, breaking the silence. "Let's take stock. Alex, what did we pull from the factory?" Alex leaned back, holding up a manila folder. Ledgers, shipping manifests, and a lot of coded messages. "It looks like this hub was supplying at least 6 other locations. 2 of them are marked as priority shipments. Weapons, cash, propaganda materials. They're moving fast." "And Travis's map?" Maya asked, her tone sharp. Sophia slid the map across the table, its edges frayed. 6 more hubs spread across 3 states, 2 marked in red. "Looks like main hubs, probably coordinating the smaller ones." Maya nodded, her jaw tightening as she studied the map. "We hit those 2 next. If we take out their central coordination points, the smaller hubs will crumble." Rachel looked up from her laptop, her brow furrowed. "One problem. The network knows they're being targeted. After tonight, they'll go dark. They'll shift their resources, change locations, and tighten their security. We'll have to move faster than we planned." Boomer leaned forward, his deep voice steady. "We've got momentum. But Rachel's right. We can't afford to give them breathing room." Before Maya could respond, Rachel's laptop chimed. She glanced at the screen, her eyes widening. Maya, we've got company." "What do you mean?" Maya asked, standing up. Rachel turned the laptop to face the group, showing a live video feed. A man in a suit sat at a desk, his FBI badge prominently displayed. He looked directly at the camera, as though he could see them. "This is Special Agent Porter of the FBI," the man said, his tone calm but firm. "I know you're watching. We need to talk." The team exchanged wary glances. Maya leaned over Rachel's shoulder. "How did he find us?" Rachel shook her head. "He's good. He hacked our secure channel, probably traced the encrypted messages I intercepted earlier." Agent Porter continued, his gaze unwavering. "We've been tracking this network for years, And your actions have made one thing clear. You're not amateurs. You're organized, efficient, and effective. We're on the same side here. But if you want to finish what you've started, we need to work together. Maya straightened, her expression unreadable. Rachel, patch him through. Rachel hesitated, then pressed a key. The feed shifted, and Porter's voice came through the speakers, clear and direct. Maya Daniels, former Army Ranger. Your record is impressive. It's no wonder you've been so successful. Maya crossed her arms, her voice steady. Flattery won't get you anywhere, Agent. What do you want? What we all want, Porter replied, to dismantle this network before it spreads any further. You've hit them hard, but you've also forced them to adapt. They'll regroup, and when they do, they'll come back stronger. We're not stopping, Maya said firmly. I know, Porter replied. That's why I'm offering you a partnership. We've got resources you don't. Surveillance, intelligence, and jurisdiction across state lines. You've got the mobility and precision to hit them where it hurts. Together, we can finish this. The room fell silent as the team processed his words. Alex broke the silence, his voice skeptical. And what's the catch? No catch, Porter said. But let's be clear. We do things by the book. No unnecessary risks. No rogue actions. You share intel. We coordinate strikes. Maya's eyes narrowed. And if we don't, then you'll keep playing whack-a-mole while the network rebuilds, Porter said bluntly. You're good, but you can't do this alone. Maya studied the screen for a long moment before speaking. You're asking us to trust you. After everything we've seen, law enforcement turning a blind eye, local cops looking the other way. Why should we? Because we're not them, Porter said, his voice steady. We've been fighting this battle for years. We've made progress. But we need people like you to finish the job. Maya glanced at her team, each of them nodding subtly. Finally, she turned back to the screen. Fine. We'll work with you. For now. But if this goes sideways, we're out. Understood, Porter said, a faint smile crossing his face. Welcome to the team. As the call ended, Maya turned back to her team. This changes things. We move faster, hit harder, and leave no room for error. Rachel, get us everything the FBI sends over. Alex, Sophia, start planning the next strike. Boomer leaned back, a faint smirk on his face. Looks like things just got interesting. Maya's gaze hardened as she stared at the map. They're running out of places to hide. Let's finish this. The safe house hummed with quiet intensity. Maya sat at the head of the table, her sharp eyes scanning the map pinned to the wall. Red circles marked the hubs they had already taken down, while blue pins represented the network's remaining strongholds. The fight wasn't over. Not yet. Rachel sat nearby, her fingers dancing across her laptop's keyboard. With Travis out of the picture, we've caused some serious disruption. But the real leader of this operation is stepping in to stabilize things. She turned the laptop screen toward the team, revealing the face of a wiry, sharp-featured man with cold, calculating eyes. This, Rachel said, is Victor Carver. He's not just Travis's superior. He's the architect of this entire network. Every operation, every dollar funneled through this system, every cell, they all answer to him. Boomer leaned back in his chair, letting out a low whistle. So, the real boss finally steps out of the shadows. What's his next move? Rachel clicked through several intercepted communications. Carver's been in the wind since Hillsborough, but he's re-emerged. Intel from the factory suggests he's consolidating power at 2 key hubs, one in Texas and another in Montana. Texas is his central command, where he's coordinating remaining operations. Montana's a recruitment and training site. Maya's jaw tightened. If we take out Carver, this entire network collapses. Exactly, Rachel confirmed. But he knows we're coming. He's paranoid, and his security is no joke. He's doubled down on defenses at both locations. Alex crossed his arms, his expression grim. Paranoid doesn't mean invincible. We've already hit his network, where it hurts. He's scrambling, and that gives us the advantage. Special Agent Porter's voice crackled through the comms. Your team's efficiency has been impressive, Daniels. Carver is our top priority, and we'll be backing you on this. We'll coordinate the assault on Montana, but Texas is yours. Understood, Maya said. We'll take Texas. If Carver's running the show from there, he won't walk away. Sophia smirked, tapping her knife against the edge of the table. Texas is where it all ends, then. Hope he's ready for us. Boomer chuckled, his deep voice steady. Montana might be colder, but I'll make it work. Carver's fortress won't stand long once we get there. Maya leaned over the map, her voice sharp and commanding. We split up. Alex, Sophia, and I will lead the charge in Texas. Boomer, you and Rachel work with the FBI to hit Montana. We coordinate strikes. No room for error. This is our final push. Porter's voice came through again. One condition. Carver comes back alive. We need him to take apart what's left of this network. Maya exchanged a glance with Alex, her jaw tightening. We'll see what happens. But this ends tonight, one way or another. Porter hesitated but didn't press further. Fine, let's get this done. The team broke off to prepare, the weight of their mission hanging heavy in the air. The fight had escalated, but so had their resolve. Maya lingered at the table, her eyes fixed on Carver's photo. This was the man who had orchestrated everything. The hate, the terror, the violence. He was the true architect of the network that had spread pain across so many communities. Her fists clenched as she turned to her team. Texas is his stronghold, but we're not walking away until it's rubble. Let's finish this. The team nodded in unison, their determination unshaken. This was it, the final fight. The Texas hub loomed ahead, a sprawling compound surrounded by tall chain-link fences topped with barbed wire. Bright floodlights cast harsh shadows across the yard, where armed guards patrolled in tight formations. Unlike the previous raids, this stronghold was fortified to withstand an assault. It was clear Victor Carver wasn't taking any chances. Maya crouched behind a rocky outcrop just outside the perimeter, her team close by. The faint hum of generators and the occasional barked command from inside the compound punctuated the quiet night. Rachel's voice came through the comms, calm and steady. I've mapped out their patrol routes. You've got a 10-second window to breach the fence before the next rotation. West side is the weakest entry point. Boomer, you're on explosives, Maya said, her voice low but commanding. We'll breach and move fast. Alex, you're with me. Sophia, take the high ground and cover us. Understood, Boomer replied, pulling a compact charge from his pack. Sophia adjusted her scope, her voice cutting through the comms. Got eyes on the guards near the entry. 3 on patrol. I can take them down quietly. Do it, Maya ordered. Sophia's suppressed shots were barely audible. But one by one, the guards dropped, their bodies slumping into the shadows. Clear, Sophia said. Boomer planted the charge, signaling the team to fall back. A muffled explosion followed, creating a hole large enough for them to slip through. Move, Maya commanded, darting through the breach with Alex at her side. Inside, the compound was a hive of activity. Trucks were being loaded with crates. Armed guards patrolled the grounds, and bright lights illuminated every corner. It was chaos waiting to happen, and Maya planned to unleash it. Rachel, scramble their communications, she said into her comm. Already done, Rachel replied. They're deaf and blind. You've got a clear path to the main building. Maya and Alex moved quickly, sticking to the shadows as they advanced. Sophia provided overwatch, her voice steady in their ears. 2 guards near the south entrance. Take them out, and you're in. Alex dispatched one guard with a swift strike to the back of the head, while Maya disarmed the other, knocking him unconscious with a precise blow. Inside the main building, the tension escalated. The air smelled of oil and sweat, and the sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the corridors. Carver's in the control room, Rachel said, her fingers flying across her keyboard. 2nd floor, north wing. He's got at least 6 guards with him. Let's go, Maya said, motioning for Alex to follow. The team moved through the building with practiced precision, taking out guards with non-lethal strikes as they closed in on their target. As they reached the control room, Sophia's voice came through. Guards are doubling back. You'll have company in less than 2 minutes. Maya pressed herself against the wall, her hand hovering over the door handle. We don't need 2 minutes. She kicked the door open, her weapon raised. The room was filled with monitors displaying live feeds of the compound, maps pinned to the walls, and stacks of documents on every surface. Victor Carver stood at the center, flanked by his guards, his expression calm despite the chaos. So you're the ones causing all this trouble, Carver said, his voice smooth and cold. I'll admit, you've done more damage than I expected. Hands where I can see them, Maya barked, her voice sharp. Carver raised his hands slowly, a faint smirk on his face. Do you think taking me down will change anything? The network is bigger than me, bigger than all of you. You're fighting a war you can't win. Maya stepped forward, her gaze unyielding. We've already won. Every hub we've taken out, every supply line we've destroyed. It's all collapsing, and you know it. Carver's smirk faltered, but he held his ground. You think this ends with me? There are others, stronger than you can imagine. You'll never stop us all. Maybe not, Alex said, stepping beside Maya. But we'll stop you. Maya motioned to Alex, who swiftly disarmed and restrained Carver's guards. Carver remained still, his icy gaze locked on Maya. You think you're heroes, Carver sneered, but you're just pawns in a game you don't understand. Save it, Maya snapped. She turned to Rachel. We've got him. Get the FBI on site. Let them clean this up. Already done, Rachel replied. ETA 5 minutes. As the team secured the control room, the sounds of approaching sirens filled the air. Maya stood over Carver, her expression unreadable. You built this network, she said quietly. You spread hate and fear to countless communities. Tonight, it ends. Carver's smirk returned, but it didn't reach his eyes. You'll never stop what I've started. Maya's gaze hardened. Watch me. As the FBI arrived and agents stormed the compound, Maya and her team slipped into the shadows, leaving Carver and his crumbling empire in their wake. The fight wasn't over, but they had delivered the decisive blow. The safe house was quiet, the air thick with the weight of the mission's success. Maya sat at the head of the table, her sharp eyes scanning the map pinned to the wall. Red circles marked the hubs they had dismantled, and blue pins indicated remaining smaller cells, stragglers, scattered and disorganized. The bulk of the network had been destroyed, but a few loose ends remained. Rachel's fingers flew across her laptop keyboard as she sifted through the last bits of intel. The FBI is handling the cleanup now, she said, her tone tired but satisfied. There are a few smaller cells still active, but nothing major. They're splintered. No leadership. No coordination. They'll fall apart in time. Alex leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. So, we're done? Mission accomplished, Rachel confirmed, glancing at Maya. The Bureau can handle what's left. They've got the resources to track the stragglers. We've done our part. Boomer's voice crackled through the comms. Montana's secure. Porter says they're sweeping the rest of the region now. Looks like this operation's finally wrapped. Maya nodded, a faint sense of relief washing over her. Good. Let's leave it to them. We've done enough. Sophia leaned back, her smirk faint. Feels strange, doesn't it? Walking away after all this? It's the right call, Maya said firmly. This fight wasn't about us. It was about stopping them from doing more harm. And we did that. Rachel closed her laptop, exhaling deeply. Carver's in custody. The major hubs are dismantled, and the smaller cells are falling apart. We've cut the head off the snake. Alex glanced at Maya, his voice softer. So what now? Maya looked around the room, taking in the faces of her team. They had been through hell together. And now, for the first time in weeks, the weight of their mission was beginning to lift. Now? She said, a faint smile crossing her face. Now we go home. The words hung in the air for a moment before the team nodded in agreement. Maya stood on the front porch of her modest home, the soft glow of the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and gold. The quiet was almost unnerving after the constant noise and chaos of the past few weeks. She inhaled deeply, the familiar scent of freshly cut grass and the faint hum of distant traffic grounding her. Inside, The house felt the same as she had left it. Neatly kept, unassuming, and hers. She set her bag down by the door, running her fingers over the back of the couch as she walked toward the kitchen. The weight of her exhaustion settled in her bones, but for the first time in what felt like forever, it wasn't accompanied by tension. She poured herself a glass of water, leaning against the counter as the events of the past weeks replayed in her mind. They had stopped something terrible, something insidious, from spreading further. It hadn't been perfect, but it had been enough. Her phone buzzed on the counter, breaking her reverie. Picking it up, she saw a text from Rachel. Montana wrapped. FBI handling the stragglers. Enjoy the peace. You've earned it. Maya smiled faintly, setting the phone down. For now, the fight was over. There would always be more battles to face, more people like Carver who believed they could spread hate without consequence. But that was a fight for another day. She stepped outside onto the porch, letting the cool evening air wash over her. The world felt quiet, still, and for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to relax. The mission was accomplished. For now, she was home. The chatter in the church was animated, almost celebratory. People gathered in small groups, their voices overlapping as they exchanged thoughts on the news report. The evening sun filtered through the stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns across the pews. But all eyes were on the television in the corner. The news anchor's voice continued, recounting the details of Victor Carver's arrest and the dismantling of the hate network. They finally got those monsters, an older man said, his tone a mix of relief and anger. I can't believe how deep their reach was. A younger woman shook her head, her arms crossed. They were organized. Too organized. And for what? To spread hate and fear? It's disgusting. They terrorized so many communities, someone else added, their voice quieter. And to think they were operating right here, in our town. The murmurs grew louder as more people joined the discussion. A middle-aged woman spoke up, her expression grim. I heard about the threats they made in other places. Fires, vandalism. They wanted people like us to leave, to disappear. The older man nodded, his face tightening. They tried to do the same here. Remember the parking lot? Those men were just the beginning. There was a ripple of agreement. Memories of the tense weeks before the gang's downfall surfacing. Another woman added, and the strange explosions outside town. Does anyone know what really happened? No one's saying anything, someone replied, their tone cautious. But it's obvious now, isn't it? Those raids, they weren't just random. Someone was fighting back. As the conversations continued, the focus began to shift. A young man near the television pointed at the screen, where the anchor was summarizing the dismantling of the network. They keep talking about a team, he said, a group that worked in secret, off the grid. Who do you think they were? A teenage girl chimed in, her voice tinged with curiosity. Could it have been the police? Or the FBI? The older man shook his head. No. The news said the FBI got involved later, after the big strikes had already started. Whoever this team was, they were working on their own. A woman near the back spoke up, her tone thoughtful. What about those strangers who came through? The ones who stopped those men in the parking lot? They seemed different. Heads turned as more people recalled the incident. The young man nodded, his eyes narrowing in thought. They weren't from here, that's for sure. But they weren't just passing through either. It's like they knew something was coming. And remember how the Reverend seemed so calm about everything? The older woman added, glancing toward Reverend Carter. Like he knew we'd be okay. Reverend Carter, standing near the pulpit, listened quietly as the murmurs spread. He remained composed, his hands clasped in front of him, but there was a knowing glint in his eye as he glanced toward the back of the room. Maya shifted slightly in her seat, her face unreadable as the congregation's theories grew. Maybe it was them, the younger woman said, her voice rising slightly. The strangers. They were tough, organized. And now this news, raids across the country, taking down people like those men in the parking lot? It makes sense. It does, someone else agreed. Whoever they were, they saved us. They saved so many people. Reverend Carter finally stepped forward, his voice calm but commanding. Whoever they were, let us be grateful. They stood up against hatred and protected our community when we needed it most. His words quieted the room, but the curiosity lingered in the eyes of those gathered. They didn't need confirmation. They had already decided who the mysterious heroes were. Maya kept her gaze on the floor, her lips curling into the faintest smile as the hymn began. The people didn't need names or recognition. They needed hope, and they had that now. Reverend Carter approached her quietly as the singing swelled, his voice low. They'll never know the full story, but I think that's exactly how you want it. Maya nodded, her voice soft but firm. It's not about the story. It's about the outcome. They're safe. That's what matters. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for